Mr. Attorney General, as you know, I continue to seek further answers in the miserable prosecution that brought Senator Ted Stevens down. We had the FBI Director, Mr. Comey, before the committee last week. He indicated at that time to me that the FBI agent who had brought about this whole issue, that he had been severely disciplined. The investigation came under scrutiny. He was severely disciplined. He didn't indicate what that was, and I think we all know there may be varying degrees. What might be severe discipline to one is slap on the wrist to the other. Can you shed any light on the status of that individual, whether he's still working for the FBI, if so, in what capacity? I have requested from Mr. Comey a copy of the report to be submitted here to the subcommittee so we can further review it. But it is important that we understand what happened.
Yep. No, and I'll support that effort to make sure that you get that information with regard to the FBI agents. There also were two prosecutors, two lawyers who were found to have acted inappropriately. They have been sanctioned. They have appealed the penalties that we sought to impose, and their appeals are now presently pending before the Merit Systems Protection Board. Once that body makes its determination, we'd be more than glad to share with you, I think that's appropriate, to share with you what the board decides to do with those lawyers. But we imposed sanctions against those lawyers, and that is now, as I said, that has been appealed to the MSPB.
And so they're still working with the FBI?
I'm talking about the lawyers. The lawyers are still
with Department of Justice.
They're still at the department, yes.
So again, I would suggest, is this really harsh discipline? Let me inquire further in this area. Last year, I introduced the Fairness and Disclosure of Evidence Act, and what we're attempting to do is ensure that the obligation to disclose the exculpatory evidence to federal defendants in accordance with Brady rules is uniformly applied across the districts. I think we saw in the Stevens case that this was part of the problem. This bill was endorsed by a broad spectrum of folks, but at the end of the day, apparently it was unacceptable to the department, and yet there was no real assistance or guidance in terms of what was not acceptable to the department. So what I would ask of you, I mean, I can keep trying to write bills on this. I'm not going to give up. I think that this is too important. But if you would be willing to work with us to determine what might be acceptable in terms of those parameters, because again, I think when we lack uniformity with regards to this obligation to disclose this evidence, you're going to get outcomes that will not only be upsetting, but are difficult then to defend from within your department. So if you would give me some assurance that we can be working with you to try to better define this, I'd appreciate it.
Well, certainly want to work with you and certainly maybe make available to you or aware of the training that we do in the department.
We've been told about the training, but again, you don't have uniformity across the districts, and so if you've got training going on over here and you focus in one area, the application is different than we have over there. It doesn't achieve the same end result.
Yeah, and that's something we've tried to eradicate through this training, so that there is one person in every office, every U.S. Attorney's office, at least one, who can be seen as almost an ethics guru, a person to whom you can go if you have a question about what materials should be turned over. And we also try to make sure that every prosecutor understands his or her obligations under what is clear Supreme Court law as defined in Brady and in subsequent cases. I think that the problems that were identified in Stevens, in the Senator Stevens case, and which I think justified my decision to dismiss the case, are not typical of what happens with federal prosecutors around this country who, in millions of cases, making millions of decisions, are complying with their Brady and other ethical obligations. And I think there's a danger that we paint with too broad a brush the really terrible experience that we had in Stevens and hold hold other people, other prosecutors who have not done anything improper, inappropriately, and they are seen in the same light. So I'd be more than glad to work with you and talk to you about this issue and try to come up with a way in which we can satisfy you that we are doing a good job. And if there are suggestions that you have about ways in which we can do this better, I'd be more than glad to sit down and talk to you and work with you in that regard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.